Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Tonight we're diving into something different, something that's been keeping me up at night since I first stumbled across it. This is a collection I'm calling Hospital Night Staff, and it's made up of 6 interconnected stories that came from various sources: anonymous forum posts, messages sent to healthcare worker support groups, and one particularly disturbing incident report that was leaked from a hospital in the Midwest. What makes these stories so unsettling isn't just what happened, it's that they all share common threads, patterns that suggest something genuinely wrong is happening in certain hospitals during those quiet hours between midnight and dawn. These aren't your typical creepypasta tales. These are accounts from real people who worked real shifts, and the terror in their words feels authentic in a way that's hard to fake. So turn down your lights, get comfortable, and whatever you do, don't think too hard about what might be happening in your local hospital right now. If you enjoy what you're about to hear, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like these. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming. Let's begin. Story 1. The empty bed in room 237. Here's something most people don't know. Hospitals never truly empty out. Even in the smallest rural facilities, there's always someone, their patients in recovery, people waiting for surgery, emergency cases coming through the doors. But every hospital has that one room that stays empty more than it should. Room 237 at Mercy General was that room. This story comes from a post I found on a private nursing forum, written by a user named nightshiftnurse_2019. The post was deleted within hours, but I managed to save a screenshot before it vanished. The author claimed to have worked at Mercy General Hospital in Iowa for 3 years before quitting abruptly in October 2019. This is her account reconstructed from that post and a follow-up email she sent to the forum moderator. Sarah had been working the night shift in the ICU for 6 months when she first heard about room 237. It wasn't in the ICU. It was down on the 3rd floor in the general medicine wing, but the ICU nurses talked about it in whispers during their breaks. Never go in there alone, her supervisor, Margaret, had told her during orientation. If a patient needs to be placed there, you call for backup first. Always. Sarah had nodded, thinking it was just superstition. Hospitals were full of ghost stories, usually connected to whatever tragic death had occurred years ago. She didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in medicine, science, and the power of rational thinking. That belief lasted until her first solo encounter with room 237. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in September. The hospital was unusually quiet, no codes, no emergencies. Just the steady beep of monitors and the occasional groan from patients deep in medicated sleep. Sarah was doing her rounds, checking vitals and updating charts, when she reached the 3rd floor. Room 237's door was open. That was the first odd thing. Hospital policy required all patient room doors to remain closed, to maintain temperature control and reduce noise. Sarah approached slowly, clipboard in hand, and peered inside. The bed was perfectly made. Military corners, crisp white sheets, pillow fluffed and positioned just so. No patient, no personal belongings, no flowers or cards or any sign that anyone had been there recently. But the room smelled like someone had just left, that mixture of antiseptic, human sweat, and something else. Something organic and wrong. Sarah checked her clipboard. According to the floor roster, room 237 was marked as occupied. DNR patient, no visitation. But there was no name. Just those 3 notes and a patient ID number that didn't follow the hospital's standard numbering system. She stepped inside, her shoes squeaking slightly on the linoleum. The temperature dropped immediately, at least 10 degrees colder than the hallway. Her breath didn't quite mist, but she could feel the chill through her scrubs. The monitors were on, but not connected to anything. The screens showed flat lines, but they weren't alarming. It's just silent, dead displays that somehow still had power. Sarah walked to the bed and ran her hand over the sheets. They were warm, body temperature warm. "Can I help you?" Sarah spun around. A man stood in the doorway, dressed in street-cloth jeans and a gray hoodie. He was thin, pale, with dark circles under his eyes that made him look like he hadn't slept in weeks. "I'm sorry, visiting hours are," Sarah started, but the man cut her off. "I'm not visiting," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "I'm waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For my turn." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Something was deeply wrong. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me to the front desk. We can help you there." The man didn't move. He just stared at her with those hollow eyes, and Sarah realized she could see the hallway light through him. Not clearly, not like he was transparent, but like he was somehow less solid than he should be. "You should leave," he said. "It's almost feeding time." Sarah backed toward the door, her training kicking in. Don't engage with agitated individuals. Remove yourself from the situation. Call security. But when she reached the doorway and turned to run, she crashed directly into someone. It was Margaret, her supervisor, holding a crash cart. The older woman's face was pale, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear. "Sarah, get away from that room now." They both rushed down the hallway, and Margaret didn't stop until they were back in the ICU behind the nurse's station. She was breathing hard, her hands shaking as she gripped the counter. "I should have warned you more clearly," Margaret said. "Room 237 isn't. It's not a regular room. What do you mean?" Margaret glanced around to make sure they were alone. 15 years ago, there was a patient in that room, Jonah Freeman. Terminal cancer, stage 4, spread everywhere. He was in incredible pain, but he refused palliative care, said he deserved to suffer for what he'd done. What had he done? Nobody knows for sure. He never said. But he made the nurses promise something before he died. He made them promise that his room would never stay empty, that there would always be someone in that bed, someone suffering, so he wouldn't be alone. Sarah shook her head. "That's insane. You can't promise something like that. Of course not." But the night he died, something changed in that room. Patients placed there would deteriorate rapidly, no matter their condition. Even stable patients would crash within hours. We stopped using it for living patients 5 years ago. Then why is it marked as occupied? I agree. Because if we mark it as empty, if we acknowledge that there's no one suffering in that bed, things get worse. Patients in nearby rooms start dying. Equipment fails. People start seeing things. People like that man you saw. Sarah wanted to argue, to insist this was all superstitious nonsense, but she'd seen him. She'd seen through him. "What did he mean by feeding time?" Sarah asked. Margaret didn't answer immediately. But she finally spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "At 3 a.m. every morning, something moves through the hospital. We don't know what it is. You don't want to know. But it always visits room 237 first. And if there's no one suffering in that bed," she paused, "goes looking." Sarah glanced at the clock. "I need you to understand something," Margaret said. "That room isn't haunted by Jonah Freeman. It's haunted by whatever he was running from, whatever he was trying to keep contained by promising it a constant supply of suffering. We've been maintaining that promise ever since. Because the one time we didn't, the one time we left that room truly empty for a full night, 7 patients died. 7 patients who were stable, who should have lived. They all died at exactly 3 a.m. The lights flickered. Both nurses looked up at the fluorescent tubes, watching them dim and brighten erratically. "It's here," Margaret whispered. Through the window of the ICU, Sarah could see down the hallway toward the elevators. The lights were going out in sequence, darkness crawling toward them like a living thing. And in that darkness, she could see a shape. Tall, impossibly thin, moving with a stuttering gait that didn't look quite human. It passed by the ICU without stopping. The lights came back on in its wake. Sarah watched it continue down the hall, toward the stairs that led to the 3rd floor. Toward room 237. Does it ever? Sarah couldn't finish the question. "Leave the hospital," Margaret completed. "No. Whatever Jonah Freeman made a deal with, it's bound here. As long as we keep room 237 marked as occupied, as long as we maintain the illusion of suffering in that bed, it stays contained. It feeds on the memory, the echo of pain. But if we ever truly empty that room, if we ever admit there's nothing there, she didn't need to finish. Sarah understood. The rest of the shift passed without incident, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time she walked past a darkened hallway, every time she entered a patient's room, she wondered if she'd see that thin, stuttering shape in the corner. She worked at Mercy General for 3 more months after that night. She never went to the 3rd floor again if she could help it, but she heard stories from other nurses. A housekeeper who entered room 237 during the day and emerged screaming, unable to explain what she'd seen. A doctor who insisted on investigating the room's history and mysteriously transferred to another hospital within a week. Patients in nearby rooms who would wake up screaming about something standing over their beds, something that smelled like antiseptic and decay. The post ended with a simple statement: "I quit last month. I couldn't take it anymore. But sometimes, late at night, I still wake up at 3 a.m., and I swear I can hear that stuttering footstep outside my bedroom door. I think I spent too much time near room 237. I think something followed me home." The moderator's note at the bottom of the saved post said that Night Shift Nurse _2019 never logged into the forum again after sending that message. Her account remained active but abandoned. And when someone called Mercy General Hospital to ask about room 237, they were told no such room existed. The 3rd floor, they said, only had rooms numbered 201 through 236 and 238 through 250. They'd erased it from the official records. But they still kept something in that space between 236 and 238, something they marked as occupied, something they never left empty. If you've ever worked a night shift at a hospital and felt that inexplicable chill, if you've ever noticed a room that nobody wants to enter, if you've ever woken up at 3 a.m. to the sound of footsteps that stutter and stop outside your dorm, maybe you've been closer to room 237 than you realized. Story 2. The Patient Who Never Left. Did you know that hospital records sometimes show patients who were never officially discharged, never officially died, but who aren't in any bed on any floor? Yes. These ghost patients are usually the result of clerical errors. Someone forgot to update the system when a patient left or passed away. But what happens when a ghost patient starts generating bills, ordering tests, and requesting medication? This story came to me through a medical billing specialist named Jennifer, who contacted me after seeing my requests for hospital-related stories. She sent me copies of actual billing records, with names and identifying information redacted, along with a detailed account of what happened at her hospital. I verified that she did work at the hospital she claimed, and that she left her position suddenly in early 2020. This is what she told me. Jennifer had worked in medical billing at St. Catherine's Hospital for 7 years. She knew every quirk of the system, every common error, every way that insurance companies tried to weasel out of payments. She was good at her job, efficient and detail-oriented. So when she started seeing charges appear for patient number 847,723, she noticed immediately. The charges were small at first. A blanket, a pillow, a meal tray. Nothing unusual except for one thing. Patient number 847,723 wasn't listed in any room. The registration showed an admit date of June 3, 1987, but there was no current location, no attending physician, no diagnosis code. Just charges that kept appearing day after day. Jennifer assumed it was a glitch. Now she sent a message to it, asking them to check the database. They replied that the patient record was legacy data that had somehow remained active in the system, and they would clean it up. But the charges continued. After a week, Jennifer went to the ICU to ask the nurses if they knew anything about the patient number. The head nurse, a woman named Dolores, who'd worked at St. Catherine's for 30 years, went pale when she heard the number. "Don't look into that," Dolores said quietly. Just delete the charges and move on. But Jennifer couldn't let it go. She was responsible for billing accuracy, and these charges were accumulating. If the hospital was somehow billing insurance for a patient who didn't exist, that was fraud. She could lose her license. The hospital could face massive fines. She started digging deeper. The admit date was June 3, 1987. Jennifer requested paper records from the archive, the old files that hadn't been digitized. It took 3 days for the request to be processed, and when the file finally arrived, it was thin. Too thin for a patient who'd supposedly been admitted 33 years ago. Inside was a single admission form. The patient's name was listed as Morrison, Peter, age 34, admitted for observation. It's following industrial accident. The attending physician's signature was illegible, and there were no other notes, no treatment records, no discharge paperwork, nothing. Jennifer checked the hospital's death records. Peter Morrison wasn't listed. She checked discharge records. Nothing. She even checked with the state's vital records office. According to them, Peter Morrison had died on June 4, 1987, in St. Catherine's Hospital. Cause of death, unknown. But if he died, why was his patient number still active? Why were charges still being generated? Jennifer stayed late that night after most of the administrative staff had gone home. She logged into the system and pulled up patient number 847,723's recent charges. They were oddly specific. A blanket at 11:30 p.m., a glass of water at 11:45 p.m., pain medication at midnight, request for a priest at 12:15 a.m., a request for a priest. Someone or something was generating these requests in real time. Jennifer's hands shook as she navigated to the medication orders. The pain medication was listed as morphine, 10 milligrams for push. High dosage, terminal patient dosage. And it had been ordered by... She squinted at the screen. The ordering physician was listed as Dr. H. Marsh. She knew every doctor at St. Catherine's. There was no Dr. Marsh. Jennifer pulled up the hospital's physician directory and searched through historical records. Dr. Harold Marsh had worked at St. Catherine's from 1982 to 1988. He'd died in a car accident in December 1988, but according to the system, he'd ordered morphine for patient number 847,723 at midnight tonight. A chill ran down Jennifer's spine. She looked at the clock. 12:20 a.m. She'd been at her desk for hours, alone in the billing department. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and somewhere down the hall, she could hear the distant sound of a phone ringing. She should leave. She should go home. Forget about this, and let IT handle it. But instead, she found herself pulling up the hospital's internal map, looking for any room that might be connected to this mysterious patient. The system showed patient number 847,723's location as sub-basement, room 4. St. Catherine's didn't have a sub-basement, at least not officially. The hospital had been built in 1923, and Jennifer knew there were tunnels beneath the building, old service corridors and utility spaces that had been sealed off decades ago. But there shouldn't be any patient rooms down there. Jennifer grabbed her keycard and left the billing office. The hospital was quiet at night, just the occasional nurse passing by and the steady beep of monitors from patient rooms. She took the elevator down to the basement where the morgue and storage facilities were located. At the end of the basement hallway, there was a door marked maintenance only. Jennifer tried her keycard, not expecting it to work, but the lock clicked open. Behind the door was a staircase, narrow and steep, leading down into darkness. She should have turned back. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, but something compelled her forward. She pulled out her phone and used the flashlight, descending the stairs carefully. The sub-basement was exactly as she'd imagined, old, dusty, filled with ancient pipes and electrical conduits. The air smelled like mold and something chemical, something that made her eyes water. She followed a narrow corridor, her phone's light cutting through the darkness, until she found another door. This one had a small placard next to it, so covered in grime she had to wipe it clean to read it. Room 4. Jennifer's hand hesitated on the doorknob. Part of her knew this was insane, that she should leave immediately and call security. But she'd come this far. She needed to know. The door wasn't locked. It swung open with a creak that echoed down the corridor. Inside was a hospital room, frozen in time. The bed was old-fashioned, with metal railings and a thin mattress. Medical equipment from the 1980s lined the walls, machines with analog dials and switches, IV stands with glass bottles instead of plastic bags. And in the bed, covered with a white sheet up to the chest, was a figure. Jennifer's breath caught. She stepped closer, her phone light shaking in her trembling hand. The figure was desiccated, mummified, more skeleton than flesh. But it was still connected to an IV, the needle somehow embedded in a leathery arm. The monitors beside the bed were on, their screens showing a steady heartbeat, steady breathing, steady vital signs that were absolutely impossible for something that had been dead for 33 years. And then the head turned toward her. Jennifer screamed and stumbled backward. The thing in the bed, Peter Morrison, she realized with horror, moved with a rustling sound like dry leaves. Its jaw worked, opening and closing, as if trying to speak. No sound came out, but Jennifer could see its chest rising and falling, see the monitors continuing to register life where there was none. She ran back through the corridor, up the stairs, slamming the maintenance door behind her. She didn't stop running until she was in the parking lot, gasping for air, her heart hammering in her chest. The next morning, Jennifer called in sick. She spent the day in bed trying to convince herself it had been a nightmare. But when she checked her work email, there was a message from the automated billing system. New charges posted for patient number 847,723. Room service, clean linens, a visit from a chaplain. She quit the next week. She told her supervisor she'd found another job, better pay, better hours. She didn't mention what she'd seen in the sub-basement. She didn't mention Peter Morrison or Dr. Marsh or the impossible charges that continued to accumulate. But before she left, she did one final search of the hospital's records. She found something that made her blood run cold. St. Catherine's had a list of permanent residents, patients who, for various bureaucratic or legal reasons, could never be officially discharged or declared dead. The list was short, just 7 names, all with admit dates between 1945 and 1989. Patient number 847,723, Peter Morrison, was the most recent addition. Jennifer sent me the billing records she'd saved, along with the list of permanent residents. I won't share the names here, but I can tell you that each one corresponds to a patient who died under mysterious circumstances. Patients whose deaths were never properly documented, whose cases were closed without explanation. And according to the records Jennifer provided, all 7 of these patients are still generating charges, still ordering medication, still requesting services, even though they've been dead for decades. The question that haunts me and that Jennifer said still keeps her up at night is this: if these patients are dead, what's generating those requests? What's lying in those beds, connected to those machines, creating bills and orders and charges in the hospital system? And more importantly, how many other hospitals have their own permanent residents, patients who never left? Patients who continue to exist in some twilight state between life and death, kept alive by machines and bureaucracy and something darker that nobody wants to acknowledge. If you're enjoying these stories and want to hear more true horror from hospital night shifts, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. The next story is even more disturbing, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Story 3. The Children's Ward. Here's a statistic that will chill you. In any given children's hospital, approximately 5% of young patients will die during their stay. That's just a medical reality. Some children are too sick, too injured, or too fragile to save. But what happens when children die and nobody tells their parents? What happens when those children are forgotten, erased from records, and left to wander the halls? This story was shared with me by a pediatric nurse who worked at Riverside Children's Hospital from 2015 to 2018. She sent it as a voice recording, and you could hear the tremor in her voice, the way she'd paused to collect herself before continuing. I've transcribed and edited it for clarity, but the core of what she experienced remains unchanged. Her name is Amanda, and this is what she told me. Amanda had always wanted to work with children. She loved their resilience, their ability to find joy even in the darkest circumstances. Working the night shift in pediatrics was challenging sick children, worried parents. The constant fear of something going wrong, but she found it rewarding. The children's ward at Riverside was divided into sections: general care, ICU, and at the far end of the 4th floor, a section that was officially labeled as extended care. Amanda didn't work in extended care. Few nurses did. It was always understaffed, always dim, and the children there were the ones who had been in the hospital for months or even years. Terminal cases, mostly, kids who were waiting to die. Amanda first heard the singing on a Wednesday night in October. It was 1:30 a.m., and she was doing her rounds in general care, checking on the post-surgical patients. The ward was quiet, most of the children were asleep, and the ones who were awake were watching tablets or phones with headphones on. But as she walked past the door that led to extended care, she heard it: children's voices singing a nursery rhyme. Ring Around the Rosie. The melody was off-key. The timing was wrong, like multiple children singing the same song at different speeds. Amanda paused. Extended care should have been silent. Those children were too sick to sing, too sedated, too weak. But the singing continued, a discordant chorus that made her skin crawl. She opened the door and looked down the hallway. The lights were dimmer in extended care, a soft blue glow that was supposed to be calming. Singing stopped immediately, cut off mid-verse, as if someone had hit a switch. Amanda walked down the hallway, checking the rooms. Most were empty. Extended care only had 3 patients that night. Room 401, Marcus, age 8, leukemia. Room 403, Sophia, age 6, brain tumor. Room 407, Dylan, age 10, cystic fibrosis. All 3 were asleep, their monitors beeping steadily. She must have imagined it. Fatigued, playing tricks on her. Amanda returned to general care and finished her rounds. But the next night, she heard it again. The same time, 1:30 a.m., same song, Ring Around the Rosie, sung by children who shouldn't exist. This time, Amanda didn't go alone. She asked Marcus, another nurse, to come with her. He was skeptical, but agreed. They stood outside the extended care door and listened. "I don't hear anything," Marcus said, but Amanda did. The singing was clear, unmistakable. Multiple children's voices, coming from deeper in the ward. "You seriously don't hear that?" Amanda asked. Marcus shook his head, looking concerned. "Amanda, there's nothing. Maybe you should take a break. Go get some coffee." Amanda pushed past him and entered extended care. The singing grew louder as she walked, but it wasn't coming from any of the occupied rooms. It was coming from the end of the hallway, from the section that had been closed off 2 years ago after budget cuts. There was a chain across the hallway, with a sign that said "closed for renovation," but the singing was definitely coming from beyond that point. Amanda ducked under the chain. Marcus called after her, but she kept walking. She needed to know what was making that sound. The closed section was dark. The lights didn't work, and the emergency exit signs cast everything in a red glow. The doors here had paper taped over their windows, and dust covered everything. But the singing continued, and Amanda followed it to the last room on the left, room 420. She opened the door. Inside were children. At least a dozen of them, sitting in a circle on the floor, holding hands, singing Ring Around the Rosie. They were all in hospital gowns, all pale, all staring straight ahead with unfocused eyes. Amanda recognized some of them, not personally, but from the memorial wall in the hospital's main entrance, the wall with photos of children who died at Riverside over the years. Donors, the plaque said. Children whose families had contributed to the hospital in their memory. But here they were, sitting in a closed-off room, singing in the middle of the night. One of them, a little girl with no hair, probably from chemotherapy, turned her head slowly toward Amanda. Her eyes were completely white. No pupils, no iris, just milky white orbs that somehow still saw. "We've been waiting," the girl said. Her mouth didn't move right, the words coming out slightly off sync with her jaw movements. "We've been waiting for someone to remember us." Amanda backed away, her heart racing. The other children began to turn, one by one, their movements jerky and wrong. They all had those same white eyes, that same out-of-sync speech. "They said we went home," a boy said. "They said we got better. But we're still here," another girl added. "We've always been here." "They forgot to tell our parents we died," the first girl said, standing up. The others stood with her, still holding hands, forming a circle around Amanda. "They forgot to call them. Forgot to have funerals. Forgot to let us leave." Amanda tried to scream, but no sound came out. Exp. She turned and ran, crashing back through the closed section, ducking under the chain, nearly colliding with Marcus in the hallway. "Amanda, what the hell, the children?" she gasped. "In room 420, there are children." Marcus grabbed her shoulders. "Amanda, listen to me. Room 420 hasn't been used in 5 years. There's nothing there. I saw them. They were singing. They were stop," Marcus said firmly. "You need to calm down. You're having a panic attack." But Amanda knew what she'd seen. She pushed past Marcus and went straight to the hospital administrator's office. She didn't care that it was 2 a.m. She pounded on the door until Dr. Reeves, the night administrator, answered. "What's going on?" Dr. Reeves asked, alarmed. Amanda explained everything. Singing, the children, room 420. Dr. Reeves listened with an expression that shifted from concern to something else, something that looked like recognition. "Come with me," Dr. Reeves said quietly. She led Amanda to her office and pulled out a file cabinet, removing a thick folder marked Confidential Extended Care Protocol. "What you saw," Dr. Reeves began, "is something we've been dealing with for over a decade. Sit down. This is going to be difficult to explain." Amanda sat, her hands shaking. "In 2008, Dr. Reeves continued, there was an error in our records system, a catastrophic error. Due to a software glitch during a system migration, the deaths of 17 children in extended care were never properly recorded. Their death certificates were never filed. Their parents were never notified. As far as the system was concerned, these children were transferred to other facilities or discharged home." "That's impossible," Amanda whispered. "How could no one notice?" "Extended care patients often have no visitors. Their families have given up, or live too far away, or simply can't handle watching their children die slowly. Some of these children had been here for years before they passed. The families had stopped coming, but surely someone must have tried to follow up. By the time we discovered the error, 3 years had passed. Can you imagine telling a family 3 years later that their child died and we forgot to tell them? The lawsuits would have destroyed the hospital. The trauma it would cause those families." Dr. Reeves shook her head. "The board made a decision. We would keep the error quiet. We would maintain the fiction that those children had been transferred or discharged. And we would seal off that section of extended care. But I saw them," Amanda insisted. "They were real. They were there." Dr. Reeves met her eyes. "Every nurse who works night shift in extended care eventually sees them. The children who were never allowed to leave. They appear every night at 1:30 a.m., the time when most of them died. They sing, they play, they wait for someone to acknowledge them." "This is insane," Amanda said. "We need to tell their families. We need to—" "No," Dr. Reeves said sharply. "The hospital has decided. Those children are considered permanently transferred in our records. Their families have moved on. Opening this wound now would serve no purpose except to destroy lives and bankrupt this hospital. Amanda stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I can't work here anymore. I understand, Dr. Reeves said. But before you go, you need to know something else. The children in room 420, they're not trying to scare you. They're not malicious. They're just confused, lonely, and waiting for someone to remember them. If you can't handle seeing them, if you can't handle knowing they're there, then yes, you should leave. But if you stay, if you work with them, acknowledge them, talk to them. She paused. They're just children, Amanda. Dead children who need someone to care. Amanda did leave eventually. She worked for 3 more months, and during that time, she made a point of going to room 420 every night at 1:30 a.m. She would sit with the children, listen to them sing, talk to them about their lives before they got sick. She learned their names, their favorite colors, their dreams that would never come true. They were just children. Forgotten children who'd been erased from records and memory, kept in a twilight existence by a hospital's terrible secret. When Amanda finally left Riverside, she said goodbye to each of them. She promised she'd never forget. And she told me this story because she wanted someone else to know, to remember, to acknowledge that those 17 children existed and died and deserved better than to be written off as a system error. I checked into Amanda's claims. Riverside Children's Hospital does exist, and there was indeed a system migration in 2008. I couldn't verify the specifics of her story. I did find one interesting detail. In 2011, 3 years after the migration, Riverside's board of directors held a closed emergency session. The minutes of that meeting are sealed, but the topic was listed as extended care records discrepancy. Make of that what you will. Story 4. The surgery that never ended. Here's something surgeons won't tell you. Sometimes, in very rare cases, patients don't come out of anesthesia properly. They're physically awake, their eyes might even open, but mentally, they're still under. They're trapped in what's called an anesthetic liminal state, caught between consciousness and unconsciousness. Aware but unable to interact with reality? Usually this resolves within minutes. But what happens when it doesn't? What happens when a patient stays trapped in that state for years? This story comes from an anesthesiologist named Dr. Robert Chen, who worked at Providence Medical Center from 2011 to 2019. He contacted me through an encrypted email service, insisting on anonymity, and only agreed to share his story if I promised not to identify him or his specific location. What follows is his account of a surgery that, according to him, never truly ended. Dr. Chen was 32 when he participated in what should have been a routine appendectomy on a man named Thomas Whitmore. Thomas was 47 in good health aside from the appendicitis. No complications expected. Straightforward surgery. Dr. Chen administered the anesthesia at 9:15 p.m. Thomas counted backward from 10 and was under by the time he reached 7. The surgery proceeded normally. The appendix was removed, the incision closed. Total operation time, 42 minutes. Textbook perfect. But Thomas didn't wake up. At first, Dr. Chen wasn't concerned. Sometimes patients took longer to emerge from anesthesia. He reduced the anesthetic gases, administered reversal agents, waited. 15 minutes passed, then 30. Thomas's vitals were perfect, strong heartbeat, stable blood pressure, regular breathing. But he remained unconscious, unresponsive. They tried everything. Additional reversal agents, physical stimulation, speaking his name loudly. Nothing worked. An hour after the surgery ended, Thomas Whitmore was transferred to the ICU, still unconscious. The next morning, Dr. Chen reviewed the case with the hospital's chief anesthesiologist. They couldn't explain it. All the drugs should have worn off. Thomas should be awake. But he remained in what appeared to be a normal sleep, his brain scans showing activity, but no consciousness. Days turned into weeks. Thomas's family was told he'd had an unexpected reaction to anesthesia and was in a coma. They visited daily, talking to him, playing his favorite music, but there was no response. Dr. Chen became obsessed with the case. He reviewed every detail of the surgery, every drug administered, every possible variable. He found nothing wrong. He'd done everything correctly. So why hadn't Thomas woken up? 3 months after the surgery, something changed. Dr. Chen was checking on Thomas during a night shift when he noticed something odd. Thomas's eyes were moving beneath his closed eyelids. Rapid eye movement like he was dreaming. But more than that, his fingers were twitching, making small movements that seemed almost purposeful. Dr. Chen leaned closer. "Thomas, can you hear me?" The finger movements became more pronounced. Dr. Chen grabbed a piece of paper and a pen, placing it under Thomas's hand. The fingers moved, jerky and uncoordinated, but they formed shapes. Letters. STLL ion SURGRY. Dr. Chen felt his blood run cold. He looked around the ICU, but no one else had noticed. He whispered, "What do you mean still in surgery?" The fingers moved again. CONTWOKUPSTILO. This was impossible. Thomas wasn't in surgery. He was in the ICU 3 months after a successful appendectomy. But his fingers kept writing, desperate and shaking. THEYSTELLCUTEANG. Dr. Chen felt sick. He knew about anesthetic awareness, the rare, horrifying occurrence when patients wake up during surgery but can't move or communicate. But that lasted minutes at most, and it happened during the surgery. Thomas was saying he'd been experiencing it for 3 months, that he was still experiencing it now. "Thomas, the surgery is over," Dr. Chen said firmly. "You're in the ICU. You're safe. The surgery ended months ago. Uno, STLL, STLL, Hemkind, Ek, L, TS, TOP. Dr. Chen called for the neurologist on duty. They examined Thomas together, checking his brain activity. Everything appeared normal for someone in a coma. No signs of consciousness, no response to stimuli. But Thomas's fingers kept moving, kept writing those desperate messages. The neurologist was skeptical. It could be involuntary movements, the brain generating random motor signals. But Dr. Chen knew better. The messages were too consistent, too coherent. Thomas was conscious, trapped inside his own body, experiencing something that couldn't be real, but felt completely real to him. Over the next few weeks, Dr. Chen spent every spare moment with Thomas, using the finger-writing method to communicate. What Thomas described was a nightmare beyond comprehension. In Thomas's perception, he was still on the operating table. He could hear the beep of monitors, the murmur of surgical staff, the sound of instruments clicking together. He could feel the pain of the incision, the tugging sensation of the surgeon's hands inside his abdomen. But the surgery never progressed. It was stuck in a loop, the same moment repeating infinitely, the same cut, the same pain over and over without end. He was aware of time passing. He could feel days and weeks slipping by, but the surgery continued. He was paralyzed, unable to scream, unable to move, trapped in eternal agony while his body lay peacefully in an ICU bed. Dr. Chen researched obsessively, found a handful of similar cases in medical literature. All poorly documented, all explained away as confabulation or psychosis. But he believed Thomas. He'd seen the terror in those finger movements, the desperate precision of the messages. He tried everything to wake Thomas up. Different medications, hyperbaric oxygen, experimental treatments. Nothing worked. Thomas remained trapped, his brain convinced it was still under anesthesia, still being cut open, still in that moment of horror that should have lasted only minutes. 6 months after the surgery, Thomas's family made the decision to withdraw life support. Thomas had left advance directives stating he never wanted to be kept alive indefinitely on machines. Dr. Chen was there when they turned everything off. As Thomas's heartbeat slowed, his fingers moved one last time. THNKYOU, then he was gone. Dr. Chen left Providence Medical Center 3 months later. He still practices anesthesiology, but he told me he's haunted by Thomas Whitmore. He's terrified that he's somehow trapped a man's consciousness in an eternal moment of pain. That through some error he can't identify, he created a hell inside Thomas's mind that lasted half a year. But what haunts him most is this: Thomas isn't the only one. Dr. Chen has been quietly researching cases of patients who don't wake up from anesthesia, who fall into comas during or immediately after routine surgeries. He's found dozens of cases worldwide, and in a few of them, a very few, there are notes from nurses or family members about strange finger movements, about patients who seem to be trying to communicate. He sent me a list. I won't share the names, but I can tell you this. There are currently 7 patients in hospitals across the United States who went under for surgery and never fully woke up. Their bodies are alive, their brains show normal coma activity, but they've been unconscious for months or years. Dr. Chen believes at least some of them are like Thomas, trapped in that liminal state, experiencing their surgeries on an infinite loop, unable to wake up, unable to make anyone understand that they're still there, still conscious, still feeling every cut. He ended his email to me with a simple question. How do we know that everyone in a coma is actually unconscious? How do we know they're not all trapped in their own private hells, screaming inside their heads where no one can hear them? I don't have an answer to that question. I don't think anyone does. Story 5. The Night Janitor. Here's a fact most people don't think about. Hospital janitors see everything. They clean operating rooms after surgeries. They mop up blood in emergency rooms. They empty trash bins filled with used needles and soiled bandages. They go into every room, every hallway, every corner of the hospital, often when everyone else has gone home. Sometimes they see things they're not supposed to see. This story was sent to me by a man who identified himself only as John. He claimed to have worked as a night janitor at Memorial Hospital in Washington State from 2016 to 2018. He sent his account as a written document, along with several photographs of areas in the hospital that he said nobody should ever see. I've included descriptions of those photographs in this telling. This is John's story. John had worked as a night janitor for various businesses before landing the hospital job. Hospitals paid better and offered benefits, which he needed for his family. The work was harder. Cleaning up biological waste wasn't pleasant, but he didn't mind. He preferred night shifts anyway. Fewer people, less supervision, more peace. Memorial Hospital was large, with 5 floors of patient care, 2 basement levels, and a sprawling complex that had been added onto over decades. John's shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and his job was to clean everything that wasn't a patient room. Hallways, waiting areas, cafeteria, bathrooms, offices, and what they called the restricted areas, storage rooms, mechanical spaces, and the old sections of the hospital that were no longer in use. The restricted areas required a special keycard, which John received after passing his background check and completing training. His supervisor, an exhausted-looking man named Dave, gave him one piece of advice about the restricted areas. Go in, clean what needs cleaning, and get out. Don't linger. Don't explore. Just do your job and leave. John thought it was a weird thing to say, but he nodded and agreed. His first few weeks were uneventful. He established a routine. Start on the 5th floor, work his way down, then handle the restricted areas last. Around 3 a.m., when the hospital was at its quietest. The restricted areas were mostly just storage old equipment, outdated files, furniture that nobody had bothered to throw away. Dusty and depressing, but nothing strange. Then came the night he had to clean Subbasement 2. Subbasement 2 wasn't on his regular rotation. Dave only sent him there once a month, and he'd mentioned it was rarely used. Just make sure the drains are clear and the lights still work, David said. Don't worry about anything else. John descended to Subbasement 2 at 3:30 a.m., his cleaning cart rattling in the silence. The elevator doors opened to reveal a hallway that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. Linoleum tiles, yellowed walls, flickering fluorescent lights. The air smelled stale and chemical. He began working methodically, mopping the floor, wiping down the few light fixtures, checking the drains and the utility sinks. Everything seemed fine until he reached the end of the hallway, where there was a door marked Bio-Waste Processing Authorized Personnel Only. The door was slightly ajar. John pushed it open and immediately wished he hadn't. The room beyond was large, filled with old industrial equipment, incinerators, autoclaves, machines he couldn't identify. Everything was covered in a layer of dust, except for one area in the center of the room, where the floor was clean and the equipment looked recently used. In that clean area was a large metal table with restraints bolted to its surface. Leather straps with metal buckles, positioned where a person's wrists and ankles would be. And beneath the table was a drain, the metal grate stained dark with something that looked like dried blood. John's heart began to pound. This looked like something from a horror movie, not a hospital. He told himself it was probably just old equipment from decades ago, back when medical procedures were more barbaric. But the clean floor, the lack of dust on this specific equipment, someone had been using this recently. He heard a sound behind him, shuffling, dragging sound. John spun around. Standing in the doorway was a figure in surgical scrubs, face obscured by a surgical mask and cap. The figure held a clipboard and appeared to be making notes. "Can I help you?" John asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The figure looked up. Behind the mask, John could see eyes that were wrong too wide, too fixed, like glass eyes in a doll. "You're not supposed to be here," the figure said. The voice was flat, emotionless. "This area is restricted. I'm the janitor. I'm supposed to clean all the restricted areas, not this one." The figure stepped closer, and John noticed the surgical scrubs were stained with something dark. "This area is reserved for special procedures, procedures that aren't in the official records." John backed away, his mind racing. "What kind of procedures? The kind that solve problems?" The figure tilted its head unnaturally. "The kind that make certain patients disappear when they become too expensive, too difficult, too much of a liability. The kind that allow hospitals to maintain their profit margins." "That's insane," John said, though he felt cold terror spreading through his chest. "You're talking about murder?" "No," the figure said calmly. "I'm talking about practical resource management. Do you know how much it costs to keep a vegetative patient alive for years? Millions of dollars? And for what? It's a body that will never wake up, never contribute, never even know it's alive. It's wasteful." The figure moved closer, blocking the doorway. John looked around frantically, seeing no other exit. "So we have a solution," the figure continued. "Patients who are deemed hopeless, who have no family, or whose families have given up, they come here. We end their suffering. We free up beds. We reduce costs. Everyone benefits, except the patients," John said. "The patients are already gone. We just finalize the paperwork." John made a decision. He grabbed his mop bucket and threw the dirty water at the figure, then charged past while the figure stumbled. He ran down the hallway, his feet slipping on the wet linoleum, and slammed the elevator button repeatedly. The figure didn't chase him, just stood in the hallway, watching with those glass doll eyes as the elevator doors closed. John went directly to Dave's office, banged on the door until Dave answered, bleary-eyed and annoyed. "Ah, there's someone down in sub-basement too," John gasped. "In the bio-waste room. They're talking about killing patients. You need to call security, call the police." Dave's expression changed from annoyed to something else, something resigned. "Sit down, John," Dave said quietly. "Did you hear what I just said? There's someone." "I heard you." Dave rubbed his face. "And I'm going to tell you something I probably shouldn't. That room in sub-basement too. It's not used anymore. It hasn't been used in 20 years, but I just saw someone there." "You saw something?" Dave corrected. "Everyone who goes down there sees something. Different people see different things, but they all see something in that room." John stared at him. "What are you talking about?" Dave pulled out a file from his desk drawer. In the 1980s and 90s, Memorial Hospital was in financial trouble. To cut costs, the administration implemented what they called compassionate resource allocation. Essentially, they would hasten the deaths of patients who were draining resources without hope of recovery. "That's murder," John said. That's what the investigation concluded in 1997. Several doctors and administrators were arrested. The program was shut down. The equipment was supposed to be destroyed, but Dave gestured helplessly. Hospitals don't throw away expensive equipment. They just stop using it. So what I saw was probably exactly what you think you saw. Or maybe it was your mind showing you what happened there. Or maybe... Dave hesitated. Maybe the people who died in that room left something behind. An echo, a warning. John quit that night. Couldn't work in a building where such things had happened, even if they were decades in the past. But before he left, he went back to sub-basement to one more time, with Dave accompanying him. The bio-waste room was empty. The metal table was gone. The equipment had vanished. There was nothing there except bare walls and a floor drain. "Where did it all go?" John asked. Dave shook his head. "It's always been gone. Whatever you saw, it wasn't really there. It's not in any physical sense." John sent me photographs of sub-basement too. In the pictures, the hallway and room appear exactly as Dave described. Empty, just bare walls and a drain. But in one photograph, if you look closely at the reflection in the polished floor, you can see the outline of something that looks like a metal table. And in the corner of the frame, barely visible, is what might be a figure in surgical scrubs. I've enhanced the image, and while I can't say definitively what it shows, I will say this. It looks exactly like what John described. And if you look at the figure's eyes in the reflection, they do appear unusually fixed and glass-like. John ended his account with a warning. If you ever work in a hospital, and someone tells you certain areas are restricted, believe them. And if you ever see equipment that looks medical but doesn't belong, don't investigate. Whatever happened there, whatever left its mark, it's not gone. It's just waiting for someone to acknowledge it, to see it, to become part of its story. Story 6. The Transfer. Here's the final piece of this puzzle. It's the most disturbing. Sometimes the things that happen in hospitals aren't isolated incidents. Sometimes they're connected. Sometimes there's a pattern. And sometimes that pattern suggests something far worse than random supernatural occurrences. This last story comes from multiple sources that I've pieced together over months of research. It involves all the previous stories: room 237, the ghost patient, the forgotten children, the surgery that never ended, and the bio-waste room. It's the thread that connects them. And it was shared with me by someone who claimed to have worked in hospital administration for over 30 years. She called herself Margaret, though I don't believe that's her real name. This is what she told me, corroborated by documents she provided. Margaret worked her way up from a floor nurse to a senior hospital administrator, moving between different facilities throughout her career. She'd seen a lot in her 3 decades: budget cuts, restructuring, mergers, scandals. But it wasn't until she reached the administrative level that she learned about the transfer. The transfer, she explained, was an informal network between hospitals. It's not officially documented, not part of any policy manual, but something that had existed for decades. When a hospital had a problem, a patient who died under suspicious circumstances, a malpractice case that could bankrupt the facility, supernatural occurrence that couldn't be explained, they would initiate a transfer. The problem would be moved, not physically, but administratively. Patient records would be altered. Deaths would be reclassified. Strange occurrences would be attributed to other hospitals. The goal was to spread the liability, to make patterns impossible to detect. It started in the 1960s, Margaret told me. Back then, it was just about protecting hospitals from lawsuits. If 3 patients died during routine surgeries at one hospital, that's a pattern. Investigators would come, insurance companies would dig deeper. But if those deaths happened at 3 different hospitals, nobody connects them, so you just moved the records. I asked. More than that, we created false transfer documents. Made it look like patients had been moved between facilities before they died. Blame gets distributed. Nobody's at fault because nobody can trace the full story. But something changed in the late 1990s. The network discovered they could transfer more than just liability. They could transfer the phenomena themselves. We didn't understand it at first, Margaret said. But certain hospitals seemed to be magnets for strange occurrences. Haunted rooms, impossible patients, things that defied explanation. And we realized that if we used the transfer protocol, if we created the right paperwork, we could move these phenomena. She described the process. Create a fake patient record. Assign them to the haunted room or problematic area, and transfer that fake patient to another hospital. Within weeks, the phenomenon would follow. The haunted room at the original hospital would go quiet, and the receiving hospital would start reporting strange incidents. Why would anyone agree to receive a transfer like that? I asked. Reciprocity. Every hospital eventually has a problem. By participating in the network, you ensure that when you need to transfer something, someone else will accept it. It's a mutual protection arrangement. Margaret had participated in dozens of transfers during her career. She'd sent and received supernatural problems, moving them around like radioactive waste that nobody wanted but everyone had to handle occasionally. But she left the network when she realized what they were really doing. We weren't solving problems, she said. We were feeding something. Every time we created a fake patient record, every time we transferred a phenomenon, we were acknowledging it, giving it legitimacy in our systems. And it was getting stronger. She told me about a hospital in Ohio that had received multiple transfers over the years. It had become saturated with supernatural activity, multiple haunted rooms, impossible patients, staff who saw things that couldn't exist. The hospital tried to transfer everything out to clean house, but it didn't work. The phenomena had become too concentrated, too powerful. They had to close that hospital, Margaret said. Officially, it was due to structural concerns, but the real reason was that people were dying, not from malpractice or accidents. They were just dying. Patients would be stable one moment and dead the next. No medical explanation. It was like the building itself had become toxic. The building was demolished in 2015, but Margaret heard from other network members that demolishing the hospital didn't destroy the phenomena, it just dispersed them. Hospitals within a 100-mile radius started reporting unusual incidents. Haunted rooms, ghost patients, strange surgeries. All the problems that had been concentrated in one place were now scattered across multiple facilities. That's when I left the network, Margaret said. I realized we weren't managing these phenomena, we were cultivating them. Every transfer, every fake record, every time we acknowledged these impossible things through our administrative systems, we were making them real. We were writing them into existence. She provided me with a partial list of hospitals that participate in the transfer network. I won't share all the names, but I can tell you this: Mercy General in Iowa, where room 237 exists. St. Catherine's Hospital, where the ghost patient remains on record. Riverside Children's Hospital, where forgotten children sing. Providence Medical Center, where patients stay trapped in anesthetic states. Memorial Hospital, where the bio-waste room remembers its victims. All of them are part of the network. All of them have sent and received transfers. And according to Margaret, the network is expanding. More hospitals are joining every year as supernatural incidents become more common and harder to explain away. The transfers are happening more frequently. The phenomena are getting stronger. It's a system that feeds on itself, Margaret told me. Every time a hospital has a problem, instead of confronting it, investigating it, understanding it, they just transfer it somewhere else. That every transfer makes the next one easier, makes the phenomena more real, more permanent. She believes the healthcare system is creating its own supernatural infrastructure. That by trying to hide and manage these impossible occurrences through administrative channels, hospitals have given them structure, persistence, and power. The ghosts aren't the real horror, she said. The real horror is that we administrators, doctors, nurses, we made them real by pretending they weren't. We wrote them into our systems, filed them in our databases, and now they're part of the infrastructure. They exist because we documented them. I asked Margaret what happens if the network collapses, if hospitals stop participating in transfers. Then all those phenomena would stay where they are. Every hospital would have to face its own problems, deal with its own ghosts. And some hospitals, she paused. Some hospitals would have to close, because the things they've been hiding, the things they've been transferring out for decades, if those all came back at once, those buildings would be uninhabitable. She sent me a document showing the transfer activity over the past 20 years. The graph shows an exponential increase. In 2000, there were approximately 12 transfers per year across the entire network. In 2024, there were over 400. Whatever is happening in these hospitals, it's accelerating. The network is struggling to keep up. Margaret believes the system is approaching a breaking point. Something's going to give, she told me. Either the network collapses and every hospital faces its accumulated supernatural problems, or she didn't finish the sentence. Or what? I pressed. Or the phenomena become so common, so documented, so real, that they're no longer supernatural. They just become part of how hospitals operate. Rooms that kill, patients who never die, children who haunt wards, surgeries that trap consciousness. All of it just accepted, part of the system. She believes we're already seeing this happen. That the stories I've shared with you tonight, the ones that seem so impossible, so horrifying, are becoming routine. That hospital staff are learning to work around these phenomena, to treat them as just another aspect of their jobs. In 20 years, Margaret said, hospitals won't hide these things. They'll have protocols for them. Don't enter room 237 alone. Check ghost patient billing weekly. Visit the forgotten children at 1:30 a.m. Monitor comatose surgical patients for finger writing. It'll all be official, documented, accepted. I don't know if Margaret is right. I don't know if the transfer network really exists, or if it's just a conspiracy theory born from the genuine strangeness that occurs in hospitals at night. But I do know this. Every story I've shared with you tonight came from people who had no connection to each other, who worked at different hospitals in different states during different years, and yet their stories all fit together. They all suggest a pattern. Something is happening in hospitals during the night shift. Something that defies explanation but demands acknowledgement. Whether it's supernatural phenomena, or collective delusion, or something else entirely, it's real to the people who experience it, and it's spreading. The next time you're in a hospital, pay attention to the room numbers. Notice if any are missing. Listen for singing in empty hallways. Watch for patients who shouldn't be there, who don't quite fit, who seem more memory than flesh. And if someone tells you not to enter a certain room, not to ask about a certain patient, not to investigate a certain area, listen to them, because some doors once opened can never be fully closed. Some things once acknowledged can never be erased. And some stories, once written into the system, become permanent parts of the infrastructure. The hospital night shift is long and dark, and full of things that wait for acknowledgement. Things that exist in the margins of medical records and the gaps between room numbers. Things that the transfer network moves from place to place, spreading them thin, but never destroying them. And somewhere in a hospital not far from where you are, someone is working a night shift right now. They're walking down a dimly lit hallway, approaching a room they've been told to avoid, about to discover something that will make them question everything they thought they knew about their workplace. Maybe that someone is you. And that concludes our journey through the hospital night staff stories. 6 tales of the strange, the impossible. and the horrifying things that happen when the sun goes down and the hospital hallways grow quiet. I want to thank you for listening all the way through. These stories have haunted me since I first collected them, and sharing them with you has been both cathartic and terrifying. If you enjoyed these stories or if they've left you as unsettled as they left me, please take a moment to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to bring you more content like this. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. I'm constantly collecting new stories from healthcare workers, emergency responders, and other people who work the night shift in places most of us never see. There are so many more tales to tell, and I promise you'll want to be here when I share them. Until next time, stay safe out there. And maybe, just maybe, think twice before scheduling that overnight hospital stay. Good night.